Thanks to Constantine, Christians felt at home now in the Roman Empire. As we learned last week, the Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity in 312 AD and made Christianity legal for the very first time in history. Soon, Christians became the official religion of Rome, and almost overnight, Christians went from the most persecuted people group to the most powerful people group. They weren't being hunted down by the Roman government anymore like Paul was. They weren't running from lions in the Colosseum anymore. Christians could finally settle down and enjoy life. Things were finally good in the here and now. Christians finally felt at home on earth, living in the moment, living in the wealth and protection of Rome. Christians became entranced by the city of Rome, falling in love with its beauty and prestige and the fleshly pleasures you could indulge there. Rome gave Christians influence and respect and education and entertainment and good food and wine. And Christians believed this health and wealth and success of Rome was God's way of blessing them. God and Rome soon became one in their minds, just like how many Americans today see patriotism and religion as one thing. God and country united, with the American flag up at the front of the church next to the cross. They say things like, my priorities go God, country, baseball, mama's apple pie. Heard that before. Only the white people are laughing over there. In the same way, Christians after Constantine began to worship their country. They loved the prestige of Rome, the pleasures of the city of man, happiness in the here and now. Living for the moment, living for today, holding nothing back, living in the now. And then Rome fell. The tribes Rome had conquered began to fight back. The so-called barbarians began to organize, and Rome was soon sacked by those barbarians in 410 AD. The beautiful buildings of Rome were toppled, the feasts were put on hold, the comfort of the empire was crushed, the luscious gardens were watered with blood. The fall of the Roman Empire had begun. The wealth and entertainment and luxury of the here and now was quickly falling apart, and Christians were left wondering, what the heck, God? How could Jesus let this happen to our city, to Rome, to the Christian empire that Constantine founded? Christians had connected Rome with God in their minds, and so when Rome fell, their faith fell with it. How could Jesus let those barbarians sack our city? How could God let them destroy our present health and wealth? How dare God let those savages ruin our spectacular now? Years earlier, decades before Rome fell and any of this ever happened, a young man was rising to fame. His name was Augustine, or Augustine, if you're a proper British man. Augustine was a brilliant thinker, and he used his brilliance to talk himself out of the Christian faith of his mother and of the empire, and he decided to go his own way instead. At night, he began sexual affairs with a number of prostitutes and lovers, even getting one of them pregnant. But by day, Augustine was polished and proper, soon becoming one of the most respected professors in the empire, positioning himself well for a future political career. Augustine had everything a Roman man could want in this life. He had respect, success, wealth, woman, sex. He indulged every earthly temptation of the flesh, and he had it all in the great Roman Empire, living in the lap of material luxury. Just like the rest of the empire, Augustine was living for the here and now. And it was good. At least, it was good for a while. Augustine was restless. Slowly, the more of this world he consumed, the more empty he felt, like none of the things or success or woman or sex could ever fill the hole in his heart. One day, Augustine was pondering all this while sitting in a garden. As he was sitting, off in the distance, he heard a girl singing a lyric from a popular Roman song. Take it and read it, take it and read it. Augustine looked around him for the source of the voice, but the first thing he saw was not a young girl, but a Bible that someone had left out on a bench in the garden. So Augustine took it and began to read it. He flipped the Bible open at random, and the first thing his eyes fell upon was Romans 13:13. Don't indulge daily in drunkenness or sexual immorality. Instead, become like Christ Jesus, and do not think about how to indulge the desires of your earthly flesh. In shock, Augustine realized that God was speaking directly to him. Augustine had been indulging the desires of the flesh, living for the here and now on earth, but God was calling him to live for heaven. So Augustine became a priest. And he decided to be celibate. No more sexual conquests, no more indulging the flesh, no more living it up in Rome, no more living for the here and now. Instead of the now, Augustine began living for what was not yet. Living for the future hope of heaven, living for what had not yet come. He was delaying his gratification from the here and now to the future joy awaiting for him in heaven, delaying gratification to a time that had not yet come, but eventually would when he died and went to heaven, or Jesus came back and brought heaven to earth. If the now is living in the moment here on earth, the not yet is living instead in anticipation of heaven. If the now is present, the not yet is future. Augustine stopped finding all of his meaning and purpose in the present now on earth and started turning his eyes to the future heaven, to what was not yet. And Augustine was still alive when Rome was sacked in 410 AD. And as Christians began to doubt their faith, Augustine began to write a book to answer their doubts over the fall of Rome. And he called the book The City of God. In it, Augustine argued that there were two cities, the city of man and the city of God. I was joking with Madison, my wife, about this, and I said, there's no city of woman. And she said, yeah, there is. That's the city of God. So Augustine said there are two cities, the city of man and the city of God. The city of man is down here on earth. The city of man is here and now, with houses and buildings and businesses and bridges. Rome, New York, Hong Kong, Vancouver, these are the cities of men. But the city of God is not like those cities. The city of God is a spiritual city, a city in the clouds of heaven, a future city that is not yet fully here, but one day will be. The city of God is not in the here and now of Rome. The city of God is in heaven. Augustine wrote that the reason the fall of Rome so distressed Christians was because we'd forgotten which of the cities was our true home. We've gotten so comfortable here and now on earth, in our well-paying jobs, in our nice houses, with our fancy clothes, and all the protection and comfort of the empire. We've gotten so materialistic down here in the city of man that we'd forgotten our true home was the city of God. When we try to find our ultimate meaning and purpose in the here and now in the city of man, we end up going from person to person, thing to thing, and place to place, trying to fill the hole in our hearts, but finding that nothing here and now on earth can truly satisfy us for long. And then when our now falls apart, when you lose a job or fail at school, or your girlfriend leaves you, or your boyfriend cheats on you, or a loved one dies, or the stock market crashes, we crash with it. If our home is here and now on earth, if our true home is Rome, then when Rome falls, we fall with it. See, they'd stopped trusting Christ and began trusting Caesar. We'd stopped putting our faith in God and put our faith in the walls and the armies and the comfort of Rome. We'd forgotten that our true home was not the city of man, but the city of God in heaven. And Augustine knew this better than anyone, didn't he? He chased the Roman dream. He got fame and success on earth. He'd indulged every sexual and fleshly pleasure of the moment. He'd reveled in the comfort and protection of the Roman Empire. Augustine had lived for the moment, lived in the here and now, reveled in the city of man. And he knew better than anyone that humans were meant for more. So ask yourself, what is my true home? The city of man or the city of God? Rome, Hong Kong, Vancouver, or heaven? The present or the future? The now or the not yet? The good little Christians in the audience are nodding their heads knowingly, thinking, the not yet. I'm waiting for heaven. We know the answer, don't we? There's even a worship song that we often sing on Sunday here. This world has nothing for me. 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 If that's true, why don't we just kill ourselves? Seriously. If the here and now has nothing for Christians, why don't we just all kill ourselves and go be in heaven? We could make a big thing of it. We could advertise it on Facebook, invite all your badminton friends. Amanda could make a t-shirt. We'd all drink communion juice that's laced with strychnine poison. Then we'd get into huddles like we always do, and we'd pray for each other, and people would be closing their eyes, and you wouldn't know if they're deep in prayer, or they've fallen asleep, or they're, dead. Seriously, if the now has nothing for us, why don't we Christians just kill ourselves and go to the not yet? Because the now does really have something for us, doesn't it? In the beginning, in the Bible, in Genesis, when God created the earth, he looked down on his creation and said, "It is good." He could have said, "Whoops, sorry, Drop the ball. Butterfingers. I'll do better next time on the planet. I'm going to just flick that. But instead, God said, it is good. The earth, the here and now, was not a mistake. It is good. God designed it. The mountains are magnificent. The fruit on the trees are delicious. The world is so big we can be curious and explore it and never be finished. And God made other humans so we can experience the joy of intimacy and family and friends here and now on this earth. It is good. The earth, the here and now, actually does have something for us, doesn't it? And God himself later came down into the here and now. Jesus took on human flesh and dignified this earth by entering into it and becoming one with it. That's what the incarnation is all about. And Jesus said in Matthew 6, "Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." On earth. Jesus wasn't talking about dying and going to heaven. Jesus was talking about bringing heaven down to earth, living in such a loving way that heaven itself becomes present in us here and now on this planet. And as we learned back in the book of Acts, the Spirit of God is not just some future reality we get to experience when we die and go to heaven. No, the Spirit of God lives within you. God's Spirit, God's presence is not just some heavenly never land off in the clouds. No, he's close and personal. He's here with us on earth. He is within you now. So, wait, what? Where does that leave us? This is confusing, right? Jonathan, you're going back and forth, changing your point. What are we actually supposed to do? Are we supposed to live in the now or the not yet? Which one? And the answer is both. Jesus calls us to live between the now and the not yet, constantly torn in both directions. This is you. Christians are called to live in the no man's land between the now and the not yet, constantly being pulled in both directions, but having to fight to stay in the middle. We're supposed to live in between, both in the now and the not yet. Whenever we lean too far either way, whenever we focus too much on one side and forget the other, bad stuff happens. Sometimes Christians focus too much on the not yet. He just jumped midair. He can do that. Sometimes we focus too much on the not yet. We focus so much on heaven that we become no earthly good. Statistically, Christians care less about global warming and environmentalism because we're so focused on the future glory of heaven that we don't care about taking care of this earth. Some Christians don't fight injustice or poverty because those are earthly issues. Our focus is on heaven. They're so focused on what happens after life that they've stopped caring about what happens in life. They say things like, "I'm sorry your son died, but you'll get to see him real soon when you go to heaven." These kind of Christians stop trying to grow in their faith. They get tired of working through their issues. They give up on changing themselves in the world because they think, well, when it all ends and the kingdom of heaven comes, then it'll all get fixed. Have you ever noticed that often pastors' kids are really screwed up? Surprising, right? One of the reasons so many pastors' kids are screwed up is because their parents were so focused on ministry and getting people into heaven that they neglected their own families here and now on earth. Daddy was always leading Bible study or making hospital visits or preparing the sermon, and he was never home. Madison just glared at me. Mummy was too busy preparing Bible studies and writing their sermon and was never home. Also. Sometimes Christians focus so much on heaven that they become no earthly good. Some Christians get so focused on the not yet that they lose sight of the now. But on the other hand, some Christians get so comfortable in the here and now that they lose sight of what is not yet. And they often become materialistic. They confuse God's blessing with giving them lots of earthly stuff here and now. They only pray about God giving them health and wealth and making everything good for them now, like some cosmic Santa Claus. Oh, pray, and God will heal you. Pray, and you'll get a good job. Pray, and God will protect Rome from the barbarians. They begin to build their identity and their value and their joy around how successful they are right now, or how their love life's going, or how good they feel from moment to moment. And they're setting themselves up for a lifetime of disappointment. If your entire self is built around the now, what happens when the now falls apart? What happens when your company goes under and you lose your job and your successful image? What happens when your relationship ends or a loved one dies and so your now feels like hell? What happens when Rome falls and everything in your spectacular now falls with it? And ultimately, if you only believe in the now, you lose hope. When a family member dies, there is no hope that you will ever see them again in heaven because this world is all there is. When you get older and death is on the horizon, you have no hope because you don't believe there is anything after the now, and your now has almost run out. When the city of man falls, you fall with it because there is no hope of ever being called through the gates of the city of God. No hope that one day Jesus is coming back. One day, heaven will come down to earth completely. No hope that one day every tear will be wiped away and every wound healed and every heart filled with love and peace and joy and things put back the way they once were meant to be before any of this ever happened. And that's what went down in the Roman Empire after Constantine in the AD 300s and 400s. Christians weren't being persecuted anymore. Now they were the ones in power, and they got so comfortable in the here and now that they forgot the not yet and became materialistic. So when Rome began to fall in the AD 400s, they were left bitter and disappointed because they had no higher hope than the city of man. Christians are called to live right here. To live in the tension between the now and the not yet. To live torn between the two, never leaning too far either way. To live genuinely in the now, but to not become so hooked on the now that we lose sight of our future. To long for the city of God, but instead of just waiting for it, actually trying to bring it about here and now in the city of man. Living in between heaven and earth and trying to bridge the gap between the two. If we focus too much on the now, we become materialistic, disappointed, and hopeless. But if we focus too much on heaven, we become no earthly good. The sweet spot is in the tension, in the no man's land. Make yourself at home right here in the middle between the now and the not yet. I really want you to remember this, so I'm going to do this as I always do it. Repeat after me. The now and the not yet.
Now and not yet.
Okay, I want you to actually get comfortable talking to each other about this. So each person turn to each other. The one person say the now and the not yet. And then the other person respond, ah yes, the now and the not yet. Okay, so go. Great. Great, you guys are ready to go to seminary. Madison is going to give you a sale pitch for Regent later. Jesus challenges us to live in the now and the not yet. Sometimes I screw up. Sometimes I say stupid things and I hurt the people I care about, sometimes even you in the audience. Yet I know I will never be perfect until I die, and God heals my imperfections, and I go to the perfect place that is heaven. And some days I use that as an excuse. Well, I won't be perfect until heaven, so, it's all good. And those days, I need to remember that Christianity is about changing our hearts and minds and actions here and now in this world. But other days, I am so racked with guilt and so impatient and frustrated that I keep screwing up. And on those days, I have to remind myself, not yet. One day I will be better. But not yet. Not yet. Some days I choose comfort and pleasure in the now over God. And those days, I need to remember that it's not all about the here and now. Delay gratification a little, Jonathan. Other days, the now isn't so pleasurable. Sometimes the now sucks. In those days, I long for heaven. Long for a time when there is no more pain, no more doubts, no more fears, no more insecurity, no more loneliness, no more struggling. And that gives me hope. Hope that helps me persevere through the darkness. Because I know there's something on the other side. But if I focus on that hope too long, I lose hope for this world. And when that happens, I need to remind myself to keep fighting here and now to change myself in the world. One day I will be able to stop struggling. One day you will be able to give up and rest fully in the arms of God. But not yet. Not yet. Some days I'm like those Christians in Rome. Two at home in this world, two at home in first world Vancouver. And like the young Augustine in the garden, I need to stop living for the moment and the flesh and the earth and the city of man. But other days, I need to go for a walk and reconnect with my earthly senses. Feel the breeze, smell the sea air, revel in the beautiful now that God created and called good. Some days I am terrified of death because I love the now so much that I can't bear the thought of leaving it all behind. And those days I need to remember the hope of the not yet and turn my fear into joy. Other days, things suck here in the now, and honestly, I feel like Paul when he says in Philippians, I long to die and be with Christ. Not yet. Not yet. still much left to be done down here. There is still much beauty to behold on this planet. There are still friendships to be forged, still mountains to be climbed, sunsets to be seen, mouths to be fed. There is light and love down here on earth, and where there isn't, we need to get busy, bringing the light of heaven and shining it down into those places, down into the dark alleys of the city of man, down into the now. One day Jesus will return. One day the now and the not yet will be the same thing. One day every tear will be wiped away. One day every child and adult will know they are not alone. One day we will be reunited with the people we've lost. One day every broken heart will be healed. One day the cries of the earth will end. One day. But not yet. Not yet. In AD 33, Jesus left and left us a mission. His Spirit came to bring it to fruition. Then Peter pissed off the Sanhedrin, so Saul martyred Stephen. But Saul became Paul and went through many trials to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. Soon, a new Bible began to form, its survival tested by a Gnostic swarm, as Constantine's arrival took Rome by storm. Yet swift was the fall of Rome, so Augustine made heaven our true home. In the AD 300s, the Roman emperor became Christian, and in the AD 400s, Rome fell. Swift was the fall of Christian Rome. So in response, Augustine made heaven our true home, and perhaps Augustine leaned a little too far to the not yet. Because his conversion story was one where he left behind his sexual temptations and earthly pleasure in the here and now, he sometimes overreacted against the now, like someone running from their past. Augustine often emphasized the city of God so much that he lost sight of the city of man. But at that time in Rome, maybe that was what they needed. Maybe they needed someone to push back against their spectacular now. Maybe they needed someone to restore the balance. What do you think we need more of today in Vancouver in 2015 AD? What imbalances do you personally have? Where are you on the scale of the now and the not yet? Let's finish the story of Augustine. In the end, Augustine lived out his last years in the Roman town of Hippo. Yes, Hippo. And soon the fall of Rome made it all the way down to Hippo in North Africa, which was part of the Roman Empire then. Which means two things. First of all, Augustine was black, which is awesome. Secondly, German tribes from the north were besieging the city, pounding on the walls, killing anyone outside, trying to break their way in and take down another piece of the Roman Empire. Augustine was inside the city, watching the whole thing happen. And with the sounds of arrows shooting, men screaming, bones crushing outside in the background, Augustine died in his bed of old age. Despite himself, Augustine actually made a difference in the city of man. Time magazine included Augustine in their 100 most influential people in history list. Despite himself, Augustine managed to change the earth here and now, mostly for the better. finally, after a long life, with the city of man crumbling down around him, with the now shattering outside his bedroom window, Augustine got to go